Katamari Damacy has jumped into my favourite games list faster than nearly any other game has done before. Going into it originally, I expected a fairly decent game with a fun and replayable core gameplay loop. However, whilst it did deliver greatly on this, I did not expect the gameplay to be as satisfying or as good as it is in the final product, on top of being one of the most cohesive and phenomenal visual experiences I've ever played, as well as being one of the best artistic expressions of happiness I've ever witnessed. Video games are my favourite medium of art as they can interlink emotions, themes and artistic expression with a player on an experiential level, through the level design, control scheme and gameplay itself. This makes each moment of a truly fantastic game resonate with a player greater than any other medium, and is the reason why gaming has by far my fondest memories consuming it. Katamari Damacy is a primary example of this notion, with its satisfying core gameplay loop used to express overall themes of whimsy and happiness in such a unique and stylized manner that truly blew me away from the very first level. This is due to the small team behind Katamari Damacy, led by Keita Takahashi, who is not only a game designer/director, but also a sculptor, being very artistically driven and wanting to use the medium of gaming to express pure feelings of positivity and happiness into one tightly designed package. This was also helped by its publisher Bandai Namco, pretty much giving the team nearly full creative range when developing Katamari Damacy. So through the game's stunning visual presentation, addictive and exceptional gameplay, as well as themes of happiness seen all throughout the game and the development of the game, Katamari Damacy has solidified itself as one of the best games in my collection. The visuals of Katamari Damacy are an anomaly. Sure, prior to its release, more stylized games such as Viewtiful Joe and The Wind Waker began to appear on the market, but nothing this abstract or artistically focused and consistent. Katamari Damacy's colourful, abstract and geometric art style was not only a great way of preventing the game from aging visually, but is intrinsically linked with the game's theme of happiness all throughout. Everything from the wavy UI to the uniquely stylized text to the absurdist recreations of real-life objects, animals, people and places is made to make the player smile and essentially takes an optimistic, comedic and even post-modern lens on true-to-life locations, which gives it an alien but homely feel. Like take the people for example. Not only are they silly guys made of weirdly shaped objects as well as crude and extremely charming faces, they are also surrounded by a surrealist recreation of various environments. From a small Japanese house surrounded with wacky and quirky objects, to multiple islands you consume by the end of the game, all feel like their visual composition and placement was all intentional and specifically crafted like a diorama. This highlights the advantage of Takahashi as a director, as due to his sculpting background he has an extremely sound idea of how to compose a setting visually, making the rather small amount of varying locations very interesting and memorable. This is what made the game's object compendium such a joy to fill out, with a part of the fun of the level just seeing different kooky objects and the unique and comical placements and timing of these objects throughout the level. Also, I found it quite novel that the people, depending on what part of the world you're in, are said to change size. For example, the people in the Japanese level and the people in the Danish level are different heights and require distinctly sized Katamaris to roll them up, and since Danish people are often taller than Japanese people, this would make sense. It is this kind of detail and charm that complements the gameplay, and which makes me really love a game, an aspect Katamari Damacy continues to deliver on. And whilst discussing the game visually, the designs of the Prince and the King of All Cosmos is great, with the Prince's design having a cohesive colour palette with bold primary colours being used, on top of a phenomenally distinct and comical silhouette which complements the entire experience of Katamari Damacy as a whole, farcical and filled to the brim with happiness. The King on the other hand is huge, bombastic and above all extravagant, donning a psychedelic head pattern and being drenched with a purple/dark blue colour palette, the same as kings and other royal figures of the past. He screams piety and intimidation whilst also being quite funny visually and dialogue wise too, cementing him as another memorable pillar of this game. Additionally, the game's story, whilst even stated by its creator as an afterthought, is still serviceable and charming in its own silly little way. It essentially involves the stars of the universe disappearing, and as the Prince of All Cosmos we must return them to normal, and is a showcase of the brutality of the King's abilities to the Prince. The dialogue and interactions between the characters are quaint and charismatic in an odd and often self-aware manner, a style of writing I quite like. Speaking of the dialogue, I also want to compliment the sound design and even the voice acting of the game, as it is all pleasant to the ear, with the melodic record-scratching grunts from the King to even the child voice acting in the limited cutscenes are all notably great and never made me want to turn off the game's audio. This, however, is greatly assisted by possibly my favourite aspect of Katamari Damacy, its soundtrack, which is jaunty, upbeat, and filled with fantastic electronic instrumentation, with literally every single piece in the game being memorable and amongst some of my favourite video game music of all time. From Katamari Tano to Fugue, Sharp 7777, to Lonely Rolling Star in particular, I cannot overstate the quality of these tunes in just this analysis. Even if you don't think Katamari Damacy is for you, at least listen to the near-perfect soundtrack, especially again to Lonely Rolling Star, which thanks to its whimsical, hopeful melody, has become my 6th favourite piece of music in any video game I've ever played. However, what possibly tops this spectacular soundtrack is that of the game's level design, which is as equivocally phenomenal as the game's visual design. Each of the small assortment of levels promotes exploration and rewards the players greatly for weirder and more challenging methods of exploration, with not only more objects to roll up, but secret upgradable cosmetic items for the prince, as well as usually a whole other area to explore. For example, possibly my favourite level in the game is Make the Moon, a 25-minute chaotic chase to form a 300-meter Katamari, where you go from only being able to explore a single island, densely packed with a variety of people and fruit, to rolling up entire islands worth of buildings, people, and even the clouds themselves, and eventually even the islands. However, along the way you will encounter various diorama-like designs of cities, a kaiju or Super Sentai-like battle at a harbour, as well as even previous level locations. On top of this, Katamari Damacy, whilst promoting this exploration of levels to grow your own Katamari and find new and quirky set pieces, never forces you to do this. Only through your own mastery of the Katamari you can be rewarded with various scenarios the developers have created, as well as extra objects to reach the level goal and beyond. This sort of challenge of rewarding the player with various world-building elements adds to the game's overall theme, narrative and charm, and is something that I feel is missing from modern mainstream gaming. Most AAA developed games seem so scared of letting the player find secrets on their own, and so usually shove everything they have in the player's face with no challenge to it. This is not to be confused with games being linear, however. In fact, most of my favourite games ever are linear, but the ability to have player-driven and challenge-based rewards that give and test the player's control and skill at the game is something that Katamari does masterfully. This also makes it endlessly replayable, whether it be the main stages or constellation challenges, the design of each level, the placement of each object, and the unique paths you can take to grab these objects solidify the game as nearly endlessly replayable. This is what cements Katamari Damacy as having some of the most tightly designed levels in any game I've ever played, and stands proudly next to games like Banjo-Kazooie, Sonic 3 Knuckles, and Dark Souls as primary examples of masterful level design. These are also benefited by the exceptional yet unprecedented control scheme of Katamari Damacy, which is the best kind of controls for a game. Easy to learn yet hard to master. Essentially, the game takes advantage of the DualShock 2's dual analog sticks, and have each of them turn the Katamari individually, whilst having both of them simultaneously move the Katamari, on top of flicking them rapidly spinning the Katamari at great speeds, as well as a jump button which can be used to observe the surrounding environment, although I barely use this during my playthrough. Whilst a little foreign at first to adjust to, the controls are perfectly suited for a game like Katamari Damacy, and more importantly, everything feels extremely satisfying to do. Every time you ram into an object adding to your mass, it feels absolutely delightful, as not only is it gratifying to collect on an audio-visual level, but is made all the more pleasurable as you are at the same time ramming both analog sticks in the same direction. This leads to perhaps the most satisfying part about Katamari Damacy, the intrinsically fulfilling core gameplay loop that is enhanced by both its level design and controls. On a basic level, rolling up a bunch of miscellaneous objects to form a ball of things the size of a whale lord is extremely entertaining and makes the game endlessly replayable and fun. Couple this with the extremely rewarding level design and intuitive controls, and you have a recipe for one of the most fluent and fantastic puzzle and arcade-like games ever made. This gameplay loop is also kept entertaining through the whole adventure through its two mission types, evenly spread out and both well utilised and explored during the 4-hour campaign. Firstly is the regular mission type, roll up enough objects to reach a certain diameter threshold in order to satisfy the king, which are all exceptionally fun and distinct. This is mainly due to a fantastic combination of excellent level design, visuals, music and a great sense of control overall. However, where this slightly differs with the constellation stages. Essentially, they take a regular Katamari Damacy stage and place special parameters onto them. Most of these comprise of collecting one kind of a certain object, whether that be a crab, swan or crown, and seeing how many of those certain objects you can collect in a certain time frame. Particularly during these segments, the creativity of the object placement shines, as it will be repetitive to have the same object be placed in a similar fashion across a given level. So often, specific locations where objects are hidden provides a decent challenge and are quite comical, further pushing the player to replay certain levels over and over again, not only to see an increase in their score, but also see the creativity of the object placements throughout a given level, giving these levels in particular very pure arcade-like quality similar to games like Super Monkey Ball. There are also 3 additional types of constellation stages, one being to roll up only one of a certain object, and when you collect that type of object the level ends. This could potentially get slightly annoying as sometimes you accidentally run into the one type of object and the level ends unexpectedly, but since it is still essentially the same extremely fun Katamari gameplay, this isn't too much of an issue. There is also one stage where you have to roll up your Katamari to a certain size, where the player can choose to end the level once they get to that certain size. This is a really fun and more speculative based mode that tests the player's knowledge of the size of the game's objects, and constant chaos that goes on inside the player's head in this part of the game, always second guessing whether their Katamari is too big or too small, is a cornucopia of fun and is one of the most replayable levels in the game because of this. Despite this, however, my favourite constellation or special stages are the Eternals, where you have no time limit and just get to mess around the stages of Katamari at your own pace, making the biggest Katamari you feel like. With the jaunty yet relaxing music and the immersive levels of Katamari Damacy, this makes these stages something that I have unintentionally played for hours at a time, and are nearly as fun as the regular stages as a more relaxed alternative. But this isn't to say Katamari Damacy is necessarily hard, far from it. My main complaint with the game is that it's too easy, with the stages having very lenient time limits. I hope this is rectified with the sequel We Love Katamari, and once I play that, hopefully this will be the case. However, due to how amazing the game is in nearly every other aspect, much is forgiven very quickly and makes Katamari Damacy a phenomenal game that I can recommend to nearly anyone to play. Yet in the face of all this, the main aspect I adore about Katamari Damacy alongside its level design is how well it artistically showcases happiness in every aspect of its visual, audio and kinesthetic design, and how it acts as a period piece of a much better time for the mainstream video game industry. Engraved in every aspect of Katamari Damacy is an artistic expression of happiness, seen in the colourful and abstract but comical visual design of the game, to the upbeat, inspiring and optimistic soundtrack, to how innately satisfying, rewarding and even cheerful the general gameplay of Katamari Damacy is. This aspect of positivity flowing throughout every aspect of the game places it in an extremely unique position that only a few games are like Katamari Damacy, where certain thematic ideas are spread so thoroughly throughout the game, giving it a specific atmosphere and charm that really isn't comparable to anything else. Katamari Damacy also showcases a time where mainstream video game publishers were able to take a risk and pursue something truly fun, thoughtful and creative whilst also still being fantastic games in their own right. Looking back at the 6th generation of consoles, so many substantially amazing video games were released that were milestones for the industry. From the Xbox reinvention of the first-person shooter with games like Halo and other phenomenal games like the Ninja Gaiden reboot, to the late Dreamcast ambition and how compact and ahead of its time it was, also housing some of my favourite games ever like Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, to the PS2's willingness to experiment and have games like Katamari Damacy, Killer 7, Devil May Cry, which literally invented new genres, to my favourite console and handheld ever, the GameCube and Game Boy Advance having the best Smash Bros, Metroid, Kirby, Fire Emblem, F-Zero and Resident Evil, as well as having superb exclusives and notably fantastic entries across every other franchise as well. Whilst nowadays carried on by the indie game scene, mainstream developers have seemed to lose all sense of developing competent, fun and memorable games. Besides a few companies like Nintendo, FromSoft and Platinum, every other mainstream video game development company has released underwhelming, incomplete and just bad games that I feel like they are starkly opposed and cynical towards their own medium, instead of taking advantage of it and celebrating it. From companies like EA making unfinished live service garbage like Anthem to Sony and Naughty Dog claiming crap like their games have scripts not game scripts, is the exact opposite direction I want gaming to go. Ignoring the aspects of video games that make the medium so great is foolish and quite immature in my opinion, which is not only the reason behind me loving indie games and Nintendo games for instance so much, but is also the reason why I love Katamari Damacy. It embraces the fact that it is a game and ties every aspect of its comical and optimistic themes into gameplay, with the levels being filled with weird and wacky apparatuses and people to find at every point, and rewarding level design that is built to make you feel like you're achieving something. Takahashi fine-tuned every aspect of this game perfectly to intrinsically link these themes in a cohesive and consistently fun package that anyone can pick up and enjoy, but it also has such great mechanical depth that more hardcore gamers could enjoy it extensively as well, just to get higher and higher scores. It simultaneously does this without falling into any aesthetic or thematic standards at the time, also creating one of the most original experiences on the PS2, not dumbing down or normifying any aspect of it, and generally creating itself a niche that has an audience that adores every aspect of it. So, as a whole, I wholeheartedly recommend Katamari Damacy, as not only a showcase of fantastic visual and level design in a game, but also as a period piece of a time where AAA games could be extremely distinct and original. Katamari Damacy is a phenomenal game, and I would like to thank Namco, Keita Takahashi, and every programmer, artist, game designer, and any other contributor who helped create this exceptional work of art, and I can't wait to play Katamari's sequel, as well as Takahashi's other games in the near future.